off. Thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I guess we should introduce ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Arthur Loftus. I'm the art director on the Legend of Vox Machina. We're still making this thing.
And I'm Phil Barassa. I'm the lead character designer on the Legend of Vox. Thank you.
So this is the art of the Legend of Vox Machina. And just to get a temperature from the crowd, do you guys, did you bring any questions with you for us?
Yeah. By show of hands, how many people have questions for like a Q&A section? We want to gauge how much time we're going to need for that. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good amount.
Maybe there'll be more later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So let's do it. Let's look at some cool
I'm
stuff.
just curious, like, are you fans of did you become fans through the animated series, or are some of you like critters from like before? A lot of critters. Word. Cool.
Awesome. Nice.
So we won't need to explain like everything, but we'll go into detail.
Yeah. Rogue holds daggers, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just go right over that.
D&D nerds in the house. Yeah. And there's no moderator, so we're just gonna talk about ourselves for an hour.
Super casual.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in a little hamlet.
In Whitestone. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's parents.
We
are
all
dead.
have a Batman backstory.
Yeah.
Batman origin. It's
In
tragic.
this universe, everyone does.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess like you want to start. Should we just like briefly cover how we got into the project?
Yeah, for sure. I've been working kind of on and off at Titmouse for 10 years now, doing mostly background design and background paint. And I've worked at other studios in LA, but I kind of always come back to Titmouse. I was actually already a huge fan, as a lot of you guys are, of Critical Role. I've been watching it since Campaign 1. What they do is crazy, and I felt like I had stumbled on something that I had just been hoping would exist someday, and then these guys just brought it to life. So when I was tapped to work on the Kickstarter trailer, I really just got super hyped. I had no idea that they were going to try to do that, although it really just seemed like a matter of time. And I was lucky enough to get to paint some of the iconic backgrounds in that trailer. There's like a cloudy shot of him on near the end and stuff like that. So ultimately, when the Kickstarter exploded, they hit me up to do art direction on this thing, and this is my first art direction gig, so it's been a
Crushing it.
it's been a hell of a learning experience. I always say if you're gonna do something for the first time, make sure it's the biggest possible thing ever. It's
No pressure at all.
No pressure. Yeah, just ace it out of the park.
Yeah. So my quick backstory is I've been a designer, character designer, and sometimes art director in animation for about 20 years now. Primarily I'm known for my work on like DC superhero stuff. I did that for a very long time at Warner Brothers. Pretty consistently. That's where I got my start in animation, but consistently and I moved around like Arthur did. That's kind of pretty typical for an animation career. You kind of never unpack your bags. But from about 2008 through 2019, when I left to do Vox Machina, I was working on the DC superheroes. So that's kind of my background. And I actually knew Travis, one of the creators of Critical Role, before I knew about Critical Role. We worked together on a Batman movie. He played one of the heavies, one of the bad guys in the film. He killed it. He was awesome. And we got to know each other when we were doing promotion for that movie, and we kind of hit it off. And then later, we just did promotional stuff, like did some panels together, and then didn't talk for a couple years. And then the next time I ran into him was on a flight to New York Comic Con in 2018. And at that point, I knew what Critical Role was because a lot of the younger artists on my team at WB were fans. They were critters, so they turned me onto it. And I was like, oh, I know that guy. And then I ended up sitting right next to him and Laura on the flight to New York in 2018. And we just rapped about what they were doing with the IP, because at that point I was like, this thing's a huge hit. Surely you guys are going to turn this into an animated thing. And he's like, dude, we're pitching it right now. So that was before the Kickstarter and all that stuff. And we hung out in New York that weekend. I introduced him to some of my friends who were like EPs on Korra and Voltron and stuff, because I knew that was similar in the vein of the kinds of things that they wanted to turn Critical Role into, like as far as aesthetic and stuff. And then they had their big, huge Kickstarter, and we stayed in touch, and eventually it landed at Titmouse, and he asked me to take a pass at the characters, and I was like, at that point, I was like, dude, I've been waiting to draw these characters, you know? Because I'm a huge fantasy fan. Like, I'm probably more known for doing superhero stuff at that point, but you know, I grew up loving like Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons and, you know, Ursula K. Le Guin and all, you know, books and fantasy books. And there wasn't a whole lot of like fantasy film stuff. It was like Conan and finally Lord of the Rings. Anyway, huge fan of all that stuff. I love what they were doing. You know, phenomenally talented artists in their own medium. And I was a huge fan of where they were taking the IP. And so I took a pass. They really dug it. At that point, Arthur and our supervising director, Sungjin, were already attached. I didn't know these guys. We had mutual friends. Everybody just spoke really highly of them. So the only risk factor for me leaving WB to go work on it was just that Arthur and I had never worked together before. And, you know, it has to really work, you know, between the art leads on a show if you're going to make music, you know. Mm-hmm. But luckily he's awesome. And Sungjin is also awesome. And yeah, so that's it. Like it was really a tremendous serendipity because, you know, had I not gotten on the like earliest flight, you know, to go to New York in 2018, I probably wouldn't have been in contact with Travis throughout the Kickstarter and all that stuff. But yeah, it just kind of worked out, and then we made an awesome show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the easy part.
Yeah, we're wrapping up early.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the backstory.
Yeah. Let's look at some stuff.
Cool.
So we got Phil's original pass up here that he did for Travis up on the top, and then obviously our season 1 final designs there on the bottom. And you can tell a lot of things didn't change that much, and then some things changed a little more.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's fun to look at them side by side because we put this slide together like this week, and I was like, oh, that's great. Like that'll be fun to show. And yeah, like you could see that the vibe is there. So when I took this is literally my first stab at the characters. Travis had sent me like kind of a background pitch Bible with like a lot of fan art. There's tons of fan art which is great, super great. That so much like kind of so many versions have been kind of put out there. It's interesting because in comparison to work I've done in the past with all these like legacy characters like Superman and Batman, you're dealing with like 100 years of comic book and animation and film history, you know? I mean, I think even in film, Superman and Batman were on the, you know, live action in like the 30s and 40s. Like so it's really interesting. Coming into this project, another thing that was exciting for me was like, wow, you know, there's been a ton of fan art and some official art. Like they have like legit graphic novels and manuals and stuff and illustrations. And, you know, it's been so popular the entire time it's been around that there's plenty of official stuff too. But we're kind of getting in on the ground floor as far as like official animation, right?
Yeah.
So I think what was fun for me is like looking at the source material and the fan art and the various iterations and talking to Travis. This is very early on. He was the one I was like kind of interacting with. And then, you know, sending this to them. And right out the gate, I think they felt like the vibe was right. You know what I mean? I think individually it's interesting looking at it because they've all changed a little bit and their subtle changes are important. I think Percy is the most dramatic change because I had no idea who the character was really. Like I'd watched a couple of their streaming episodes, I think maybe 3, and like that Percy's character hadn't really come out yet at that point, you know, like they had done some shopping episodes. And so here he's very like, you know, ostentatious with his color scheme and the detail in his outfit. There had also been the animation done for the Kickstarter, so I was definitely referencing that. He's got like a gold, like, you know, revolver, which is like a little absurd. But, you know, again, that's what's fun about it is like, you know, even his attitude. While you could look at the final design and it's like there's a lot that's still there, like as far as his silhouette and stuff like that is very similar. But it's a big departure in terms of like color palette and even his attitude. He's got that kind of smug little smirk, you know, and then he's more, we go more brooding, you know, Bruce Wayne with him, you know, ultimately, right? Is it, and I don't know, Arthur, is there anything you want to talk about specifically?
Yeah, that Percy feels like you come back to him 30 years later, and that's kind of who he Grandpa Percy.
Right.
Yeah, but I think Grog had the most interesting subtle changes.
Sure.
Anatomically, he's not really that different, but definitely the whole face, like we made the ears bigger to sort of like give him a little more like Homer Simpson kind of like big dumb guy, but he can turn into the Hulk when he needs to.
There's a cuteness to that, you know, adding those kinds of features. When I drew Grog, I just was thinking of this more seasoned, like, you know, brutal, you know, warrior type. And I kind of went jet black with the mutton chops, which I'm always trying to get that in there. And just
I noticed they came back on Vedmir.
Oh, I'm always going to try to get them in. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain characters I'm always going to try to insert, you know. But it was fun. The reaction that I got from Sam and Travis and Matt and all those guys was very positive. And then there's these subtle changes once I started working with Arthur and Sungjin. So this is before the top panels, before talking to Arthur and Sungjin, and then the bottom panels after we had been working on the characters for a few weeks, right? So it's like Keyleth, for instance, changes are very subtle, but they're like slightly longer, the more streamlined hair, like the silhouette, you know, just to kind of have this accentuate the length of her shapes. One note that I got specifically from Marisha, and it's very subtle, but it's like she felt like the initial pass felt a little too naive and too innocent, even though that's a huge part of her character. Because the character has like there's a romantic relationship dynamic angle for her story arc.
We don't want her to feel
underage. That's literally what she's like, you know, there's young and then there's illegal. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and of course this is stuff I didn't know going into it, right? I didn't know when I was doing my initial pass. All those things, hadn't talked to the creators, hadn't worked with Arthur yet. So like, you know, certain things like the length of the gnomes, like the gnomes are far more squat, you know. I went super anime with that mace, with Pike's mace. It's got to be huge, right?
Yeah.
You know, the Scanlan pass is more feral or more like, you know what I mean? It's more like a little more, like a little less kempt, like not quite the like lounge lizard guy that we have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Something a little more roguish, like he's gonna go and pick your pocket, and Scanlan is definitely he's not combat oriented.
No,
really.
He's not as smooth as he thinks he is, but he's like more of a smooth operator, right?
Yeah.
So it was stuff like that. And by the way, like I had plenty of material so that I could have maybe done that. The final version of Scanlan is not too dissimilar from some directions they had already explored. But of course, coming in initially, I was going to do my own thing and just see how that landed. I think the interesting thing is that Vex was a home run. Like that doesn't change much at all. We simplified some things, moved the feather to the other side, because once you start turning that head, it's really weird. The feathers gets once you start turning things, you're like, oh, that doesn't work at all, you know. And removed the pouch and then simplified the belts and stuff. But
Yeah.
It's
tiny
mostly
stuff.
subtle changes, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's fun to look at that again.
Yeah. Ooh, action poses.
Yeah. So this is this is pretty much once we figured out like what they were going to be. And it was kind of like, all right, let's get some really cool, juicy like action poses. It could be used for various things like merch and stuff like that. I don't think I had done turns yet when I drew these, but we knew what the characters were going to look like. You know, like Arthur had designed the final version of all their weapons. And this is just kind of to give, sometimes some of this stuff is like to give the animators a little more information of how they, you know, and board artists, frankly, like our board team is our first audience outside of like our executive bosses and stuff. And the board artists are like the first artists that have to interpret your work. So you really want to like, you know, communicate with them effectively and provide them with as much information as they can so that they can understand how the character, like the various angles and how to put the character through their paces and stuff. You know, they're not required to draw on model, but it's good if they have more information so they can get closer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It all comes down to acting.
Yeah.
How do these guys actually move?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we freelanced out these awesome color keys of Iman really early on in the process to Mike McCain, super talented painter. He might even have a table here, I'm not sure. But yeah, Iman was a huge challenge. We knew that this would be a recurring location in the universe. As you can see from the new Season 2 trailer that dropped, we spent a lot of time here until we don't. And so we really wanted to think of like how does this whole city work? How do we establish a clear hierarchy to how all these people interact on a day-to-day basis? And then how do we make it obvious that all of that is like visible in the construction of the city? So we always knew we wanted to have the castle be the tallest thing. And that basically all the roads, you know, if you were going in from the front door, all the roads leading up that hill to the Cloud Top District would make it super obvious, like this is where all the power leads to in this town. Yeah, it was a blast, and huge shout out to Kang Wei for helping me decipher this massive city. It was a mammoth task.
And there's more verticality in this version than there is in like the previous official versions.
Definitely, yeah. If you look at the campaign guide, it's pretty flat. It still has kind of a small hill to it, but I guess part of the fun of designing this universe is that while we have sort of a realistic finish to our backgrounds, a lot of the shape language we're playing with is really just playing with the scale of things, blowing things up in ways that I don't think the Critical Role guys were expecting, and certainly like wanted to surprise the fans and give you guys something that you wouldn't have seen before. So like, yeah, we made the castle almost like magically enormous, like that much marble in one place shouldn't be able to stand as tall as a skyscraper, but we just imagine this is a universe where you could have magically infused stone, so why not go crazy? And the throne room inside that castle is equally massive, to the point where Matt said, that looks like the Galactic Senate, maybe let's bring it back a little bit.
Reel it back a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So that was a lot of fun, surprising them and then having Matt slap my hand and be like, you went too far there.
But I think that's how you know you did it right, though, because you really should try to push things beyond reason and pull back, as opposed to like be too timid with stuff. You know, you want to try to be bold when you're really first approaching a problem or like an idea or a concept, because you don't want to approach it with like too conservative of a mindset right out the gate. You know, it's always, I think, a little easier to pull back from a big, you know what I mean, making a big statement, and then you can just dial it back and trim some fat. Absolutely. I guess. I also love that it's this is such a mood. These are such mood pieces. You don't often have time to do this in like TV series animation. You don't say have time or budget, and it's like really nice to like pull in art directors from other studios to have them take a pass at like big mood pieces. Absolutely,
yeah. Mike McCain's an art director. We had a lot of art director brains coming together to put all this stuff together.
Gilmore. fan favorite Gilmore.
Yeah, there's the first pass on the left, and then kind of after Matt's notes about kind of giving him a little more physique.
Yeah, a little heftier. I love where he landed. We started, with the one on the left, and the kind of all the energy is kind of right, but he just needed to have a little bit more of like a kind of a big bear.
Yeah,
what I mean? I think he's a little cuter now, and a little more. There's some charm to it that I think is.
I think Matt requested dad bod.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was definitely the one that was like, he never insists in like a very like an oppressive way, but that was a note that was specifically from him.
That was a firm request.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just have eyeshadow eyeliner on one eye. That's a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw it and I was like, we should leave that in.
Leave that in
eternally.
That's me, I think.
Oh no.
It might have been. I'm not ashamed. It shows that I'm human, man.
Yeah. Oh, the style frame.
Yeah. Cool. So there's a fun backstory behind this one.
Yeah. I think early on we were really hitting things off with the Critical Role guys, but we had this extra layer of like, we're also trying to communicate to the Amazon folks, what is this show, what is Critical Role, and what's our take on it.
Yeah.
They had seen a lot of character designs, kind of like the one we just saw of Gilmore, just the model sheet with
Sure.
the white background.
Yeah.
And I don't think they wanted to see basically what we were really doing, so
Yeah.
we decided to do this style frame to put all the pieces together with lighting and.
Yeah, it's like Arthur said, it's like we were trying to show them what the whole thing would look like, because you're showing them component parts and it's just one or two ingredients from a soup. You don't know what the soup's going to taste like, right? So we had to put ourselves in their shoes. There's always, you got your creative bosses, and then you have the creative like execs that are like more the money people, and they're not in every meeting, with the creators of the IP. So like Arthur said, like our Critical Role bosses, the creators, were super hyped on what we were doing. But at Amazon, they weren't, we hadn't really convinced them, I guess. And not that they were so skeptical, but it was like,
It's like trying to sell someone a car by showing them the engine block.
yeah, exactly. and if their expertise is not necessarily in building the car, right? They're just kind of giving their, impressions, and we're trying to accommodate that. So, you got to imagine they're getting these character designs that are sometimes just flat color, line art, flat color, white BG. It's like, what is this going to look like? So we came up with internally, we're like, hey, let's do a style guide. Let's, or like a style frame where it's just one scene that we know is going to be in the show, and we can really highly dramatize it. And we can show them exactly how we're going to finish this thing. And so Sungjin did some compositional layouts. I went in and drew the characters. Arthur painted the BG, and then we put it all together with color and everything and sent it off, and we were really proud of ourselves. And then like we were sitting there and we were like, what if they hate it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like, it didn't occur. I mean, I guess I just pushed that fear back, because it's like, it didn't occur to me while we were doing it that like this could be really shooting ourselves in the foot if they're like, oh, that's what it's going to look like? Like, I don't know about that.
It's
so,
like the do you like me, yes, no, and it's like, wait a second.
So, but yeah, they loved it. I mean, so that it worked out, but that could have really backfired,
Yeah.
They could have been like, I gotta rethink this whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I love the piece. It's this actually happens in the show, not exactly like this, but pretty much
Pretty similar.
Yeah. So this was basically our proof of concept for our bosses at Amazon.
Yeah.
That's why we did this thing.
Yeah. The rest is history. Whitestone. I actually haven't shown some of these before, but these were at the top. These gray images are like initial concepts for Whitestone. I specifically remember making the sentry like way too big, like a mountain sticking out of the middle of the city, and so you can't even see it. But these are the people. I mean, they're dots. Which I think would have been fun, but Matt, that was the one where Matt was like, that's a little too crazy. It doesn't match any of the canon. So we ended up scaling it back, but the tree is still enormous. I mean, big enough to look like the people moved here to worship this place. And Whitestone was a blast. There's just so many little things baked into every nook and cranny of it. Like the weather vane on every house is like a sun symbol, and there's tiny bits of like white stone kind of like marbled through all the cliffs surrounding the city. It was a lot of fun to design this stuff. He also shot down the massive like megalith ring surrounding the castle. Like, are you sure?
It's a Mass Effect ring.
Yeah.
Portal.
Could be cool.
Questionable perspective on this little.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's definitely just the same castle flat.
How dare you?
Yeah. It's Arrested Development. It's just a fake house. And some of the monsters throughout Whitestone.
Some zombie giants, regular old zombies.
They really had a big call for seeing different things throughout the season. They didn't want to see zombies just peppered throughout the entire season. So we started off with these awesome wraiths that Sean O'Neill designed.
A buddy of ours, Sean O'Neill, who's actually art directing on Invincible. He worked with me. He was one of the character designers on my Young Justice team. So, he's great. He's a fantastic artist. And I didn't want to do the wraiths because I was busy doing like all the main cast stuff. And I was like, oh, let's get Sean in here to do some monsters. And they ended up being such a pain in the ass. I think I have a good like radar for what designs are going to be a nightmare, like how long they're going to be getting noted, Yeah. So I tend to find somebody capable to
delegate,
bang their head against that one.
Yeah.
Sungjin was very like particular about the wraiths. He had all these ideas, all these fanciful ideas. And so we went through some versions, and they were maybe even a little too complicated because I think Rev, our really talented animation studio production Rev, they pushed back on the Wraith designs. Like we had gone a little too far and made them maybe slightly less friendly for animation in terms of our budget.
Yeah.
You could animate it, but it's like you don't want to break the bank for it. But this is the design we ended up with, and I think it's really dope, and I love all the various versions, like when they're getting like smashed to bits, and you got all the goof.
That's one of my favorite episodes. Just the ending is crazy.
Yeah, that's actually episode 4 is probably one of my favorites too. It's a little more contained. I love that it's just in that one location.
They told us it would be our bottle episode, but it blew up anyway.
It still got large. Yeah, and we brought in some talented help. We brought in Sean O'Neill, Jeff Wamister, help with some stuff. He drew a rabbit.
Yeah.
You drew a rabbit for us, or like, what was it? It's
the
jackalope or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's also a director at Warner Brothers, so just bringing the big guns, and then the zombie wolves.
Yeah.
Those are fun.
Yeah, those ended up being so complex that there was no way to do them in 2D, so we had this crazy 3D rig where its face splits open, and I mean, every creature along the way in this show that gets too insane for 2D ends up becoming 3D, and we've learned a ton from each of them, so very excited for you guys to see the ones that are coming up next.
Season 2 is going to be pretty epic.
Yeah, we went ham.
The zombies, though, like, what did we build? We did a bunch of iterations, like we came up with like 10 or 12 bodies or something, and then redressed them, and then we built them.
Those are 3D.
We built them in 3D
some
too.
Scenes too. Generally, when they're in the background where you wouldn't be able to tell as easily, those are 3D.
Yeah, we should have put the Arthur Loftus model on this. There's Arthur actually gets a cameo, and I think he gets his head bitten off or something. There's like one of the rebels that looks like Arthur, and he dies brutally.
Yeah. I think all our cameos die brutally except
Except me,
yours. Yeah.
I didn't pick my cameo. It was requested by
picked for you.
Sam Riegel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, can we make that shirtless, sweaty guy?
I'm the dude at the end that Sam flirts with.
Yeah.
That's all. And I really am that ripped. I'm not going to show you guys. It's a kid's show. Yeah.
Yeah.
So fun stuff. But yeah, we kill a lot of people on the crew. In Whitestone, actually.
That's how I
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah,
But-
Delilah slices open our character design assistant.
Yeah, our character design assistant, Luke Ashworth, gets his throat cut by Delilah, which is how I think he actually wants to go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's a big critter.
he's a
so
huge
like-
critter. What was great was having a lot of critters on the show, people that really, really know the material. Like Arthur, you know the material really well. I got familiar with it more in the context of doing the show, though I did watch my fair share. I must have watched like 25 or 30 episodes of the first campaign, so I know it fairly well. But we have like diehard critters on the show, like people in our color team, paint, background stuff. So there was always a lot of really good suggestions that would just be that little extra something for fans, which was a lot of fun. And I'm sure a lot of the it pays off because there's stuff in the background that the keen-eyed observer will see,
Yeah. The pepper box and bad news. Yeah, this is the hero prop for the season if there ever was one.
Totally.
Yeah, you guys probably recognize the middle left guy as the kind of finished design. I think Taliesin had some kind of description of these two guns. It's like the list is basically like a scalpel, and then bad news is like a sledgehammer. So we were trying to find some design ideas that would make them visually distinct from each other. And yeah, the list has basically got to have some fancy filigree on it. It's Percy's revenge embodied in a physical thing, so it's got to be fancy.
Yeah.
And bad news, we kind of went through a bunch of, you want to make a fantasy sniper rifle that doesn't look too much like a gun because this is the first gun to ever exist in this universe. So we really played around with some pretty big kind of flamboyant shapes, like some of these weird ones at the bottom, like the tree leaf motif, the steampunk stuff. But ultimately, Taliesin knew exactly what he wanted, which is basically like a Jules Verne kind of take on it.
Right. Which is like not quite steampunk.
Yeah.
It's
just outside of steampunk.
Yeah.
A little curvier.
I'm thinking of the Key and Peele skit where he's like the steampunk. The illest lemony snickets. I love this model. I love Pepperbox specifically. I didn't draw Bad News very often because he only uses it like once or twice.
Yeah.
But I love Pepperbox because it's detailed, but it's not too detailed.
Yeah.
And the silhouette is great, and it doesn't feel too anachronistic. It's tricky, that trick of making it feel like it's not too futuristic, like for the era.
Yeah.
For being, there's some liberties. I mean, it's a fantasy show, so we can have some fun. But there was a lot of discussion about it, and I think Matt and those guys are they know what they like, and they know what they want it to be. And Taliesin also, obviously, had a lot of input.
Taliesin's like a medieval weapons expert, so
which
explains why he made this a part of his character.
Sure. He has some crazy fun ideas. And, and I like drawing it. And we built a 3D model, so after the first few times I had to draw it, just referencing Arthur's model, then once the 3D model was built, anytime I had to pose Percy out, I could just grab the 3D model, put it in the right pose, and then do a line drawing over that. So that's really nice to have the props all built out. It's kind of a luxury. You don't always get that.
We did a lot of that with the backgrounds too. And
yeah.
I mean, we even tried doing it with animation by having a 3D Vox Machina, but they just don't work.
We totally built a 3D version, and it's the least
in like
used.
one scene ever.
Yeah, most expensive. There's something else that was really expensive, but I forget now. Something that we're like, well, that was a lot of money.
It's Brimside.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He was not cheap.
Yeah. We got some mileage out of him. There was something that we made that I'm like, we didn't get that much. I'll think of it.
Yeah.
I'll tweet it out. No.
We did our best to not kill ourselves, and then we killed ourselves.
Yeah, but yeah, I love this props, and just having those things built. Like Scanlan's loot, also it looks simple, but there's some tricky angles on it. So we have the 3D model, so I'm like, I know that I nailed it when I draw it. You know what I mean?
That's a tough one because the neck is
and the bevel and the roundness at the bottom of
we make our lives difficult.
Yeah.
Some kind of Orthax designs that didn't quite make it.
Yeah. So there's kind of funny because it's like, this is obviously, so the first pass, that's not what any version of Orthax has ever looked like. So we show the smoke thing building up, and we kind of have flashes of the demonic possession Orthax. But then in the final, I think last 2 episodes, I guess, is when we really see the demon.
Yeah.
And I pitched to Arthur, and we both like the idea of having this more corporeal, like kind of Venom meets like some sort of Guyver-y thing. The reason I pitched that, I don't know, maybe like that one on the right is like very boss fight in a video game. Like, the pepper box is huge, and it's like you gotta shoot the little red orbs to kill. I don't know, but like the real reason for me, outside of just thinking that looked pretty cool, was that kind of effects animation is really challenging and really difficult. The final version, and kind of where we knew the canonical version was more effects heavy, and we were worried that would trip up our overseas animators.
Yeah. So
we tried to pitch this really like kind of more corporeal, like weird version.
We tried saving Rev, and they wouldn't let us.
We tried to protect our animators by kind of going in this other direction, but it's not. It's the creators were like cool, but that's just not the character.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. Like that's we have to be faithful to that. And I think what we ended up with is both cool and recognizable to the fans, and like what they expect. It did kill the animators.
It did, yeah.
Yeah. So we that was our reasoning behind pitching the alternate, and totally right. But at the same time, it's what we ended up with is the right direction, and that often happens. We'll throw out a left field idea to see if there's something that they like about that they haven't thought of, but we have the dynamic is so good with the creators that it's a really kind of equitable exchange. Like, they're willing to entertain those ideas.
Yeah, it's very collaborative.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're only off by a little bit, and they'll kind of push it there by adding some really cool idea that maybe you just didn't think of.
Yeah, exactly. And so they are very open to hearing us, like, or to letting us like go off script, so to speak, and come up with ideas that maybe they hadn't thought of. In this case, I'm really glad that, like, we ended up where we ended up, because I think
that last episode is so
yeah, cool. And I think that final model is what Orthax, it feels right. You know what I mean? I love the way it all came together.
Yeah, it was worth the pain.
Yeah.
In some cases, we literally could not get the level of finish we wanted from just straight up 2D animation, so we actually painted it as all these multiple overlaying layers in a background, and it's actually all like played with in After Effects to add additional smoke and warp things around to get this crazy amount of just like rendered out awesome looking smoke. So these are some of my favorite shots, because the comp team really went nuts taking that face and puppeting it to talk in those shots. Everyone really went whole hog on the last episode.
Yeah, and a lot of this, when it came back, we massaged it a lot in-house. Like, we had our comp team on it.
Absolutely. The post team on our show is ridiculous.
Yeah.
One of the things that separates us from a lot of shows.
For sure. Like, we have animators that will punch up scenes, and, there's such a, my entire career, the pipeline is pre-production is done in the States, and then we work with, like, talented Korean studios in Seoul, you don't always have in-house animators on our end.
Yeah.
But luckily we have, Titmouse is great about that. They have like a lot of really solid, like local animators that can help you punch up scenes and stuff once it comes back. So that the burden isn't always on our partners in Seoul to deliver everything final. Some of the retakes they handle, but luckily with this production and with others at Titmouse, we have really good local talent that can help us with that.
Yep, we're lucky to have them. Wanted to shout out our color stylists here. They basically, I think it's what separates our show from so many others, just the level of sophistication of the color that goes on top of these awesome character models before we ship them out to Rev. Some of this stuff is like the gradient of light hitting them at the top is more like a comp effect that would go in at the end, but it's all figured out in the color design stage, and yeah, it's that awesome team that makes that possible.
Yeah, and we have some really amazing color script stuff that we can't show because it's for season 2, but we have some really, just amazing painters on the team that we're able to do color script stuff for us, and then our in-house ink and paint team is phenomenal. And those little extra touches like the gradients, and the extra little bit of comp goes a long way to kind of sell the atmosphere. And I think so much of the mood is determined by color, and we just had a really fantastic team that helped us get it over the finish line. Really, the color team is the final touch of pre-production before it goes to our animation team. So they really have to be great to to put a bow on the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Pretty much.
I think we're about halfway through. We could probably start taking some questions before we run out of time.
We have a couple more slides, but we could talk about that if we have time after questions.
Yeah, totally.
So if you want to do questions, I think just form a line behind the microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
This is a dumb question, and I don't even know if you know the answer, but I've been very curious about a specific moment in the first season when they're having a conversation about Percy's bullets and who they are for. Someone says, what's the last bullet for?
Right.
Yeah.
And then there is a very blink and you'll miss it shadow of Percy with a gun against his head for 2 hot seconds. Was that planned?
Yes.
It was.
That was
in the
boards.
script.
Yeah,
That is amazing. Definitely. I was wondering if did a storyboard artist slip this in, or
that
that
little
is very
subtle
cool.
shadow thing was totally intentional. It's I don't know if you want to take it.
We had a separate model specifically to make sure they got the shadow shape clear. So
exactly.
That is dope.
Yeah.
That was my
it's
question.
it's like basically a suicide pact.
Yeah.
Fun stuff. Family show.
See. Hello.
Hi.
You kind of briefly talked about the comics, so I was just wondering, did the Vox Machina Origins comics make any have any influence on your original designs, or were you trying to go for something totally original?
I don't at this point, so this is 3 years ago now, so I don't remember everything I looked at as far as influence. I bought the comic book. Primarily, I was looking at the Pitch Bible stuff that Travis gave me, and it was a lot there was the Kickstarter art, and so that might have been my primary thing that I looked at, because the Kickstarter art for the animation was already curated by the creators. They had already done that with other artists as a pitch for the show. So knowing that, you kind of know this is basically a template, and they kind of want to see it in my style. So I'm not sure if I looked at the comic book for influence, but it all kind of is related, has similar DNA, because all of it is has to go through the creators to be approved, and they know these characters inside and out. And like, for instance, I pitched a couple things like on the characters that were just my own thing, and it wasn't right. Like for Vax, I had given him like the undercut, kind of shaved side, as it says. And Liam knows exactly what he wants that character to look like. So it's kind of, like the comic book and the animated stuff is all going through their filter and needs their approval. So
Thank you.
right on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My question, hello. My question
Hi.
is actually very similar, but it was kind of when you're working with, because you worked with other IPs as well that are like, obviously there's so much history behind the superhero stuff and things like
For
that.
sure.
When you're working with this really well-known IP and there's so much fan art out there and so much like pre-existing stuff, how do you sort of avoid pulling too much or too specifically from other people's versions of it? And how do you sort of keep it in vein of like your own style and your own ideas while representing the IP as well?
Yeah, I don't think about it too much. Like I feel like when people ask me to do a pass at something, I really like having something to build on. Like that's why I loved the work, like what my job was at WB was to build on this legacy stuff, but to draw it in my own styles, which is very intuitive. It's like, your speaking voice or whatever. So it's all my influences, and I don't think about those anymore. And it just kind of comes naturally. And since stylistically I have my influences, but I'm not, there's no direct like correlation. Like I'm sure if I listed some you would see and some you wouldn't. But yeah, just long story short, I don't overly dwell on like, oh, this is too similar to somebody else's take. I just really don't worry about that, I try to be faithful to the themes and the like core aspects of the character, like what are the really important things about that character. And then for me, I feel like it's very intuitive where to go, It would be harder if artists that had that were similar to me or that come from a similar school had already done a pass, but so far in my career that hasn't happened very often. Like I'm not really usually following somebody where we kind of come from the same school. So I've been lucky that, it's something that seems relatively fresh, even with the DC stuff, because for years before I did the DC stuff, the primary animated version was Bruce Timm. And I've worked with Bruce and I've done stuff that he likes, but like also I have my own way of doing things, and I don't have to just draw on things that are influence from his sphere. I bring in a little more anime and other influences. So once I had the opportunity to do that, it wasn't going to feel just like what Bruce had done. So.
Yeah, I think to add to that, like a lot of the fan art, there's some really amazing fan art out there for Critical Role. A lot of working professional friends of ours who do it all the time. And generally what I see out there is mostly like illustration-based
That's
work.
a good point too.
Yeah, it's very finished, very rendered, and very detail-heavy, and a lot of that stuff, while it might work as like a basis for a 3D model, probably isn't going to work for our pipeline. So a lot of it is actually simplifying it. Like we did a huge simplification pass on all the logos and emblems for like Whitestone and Iman and stuff like that. So that's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've been doing it so long, I just bring up Midjourney, type my name in,
Yeah.
Critical Role, fantasy,
Have the AI do
boom.
Hi.
Hi. So I actually had a question with art direction in terms of, I guess you talked already a little bit about art directing for such a big IP, but I was just curious about what advice you might have for people who are interested in doing art direction like this, or people who might want to pursue it, whether that's advice for actually doing it or things to work on to get up to that level in the future.
Yeah, that's something Phil and I have talked about a lot. Phil's obviously art directed for years. I come at it more from the background side of things, and we've often talked about how a lot of art directors seem to come from the background side of things.
I think it's better, frankly. I mean, I feel like my shortcomings as an art director were because I've primarily focused on character design for my whole career. I mean, you can come from almost any discipline and do it, but it's really good to come from an environment perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe specifically for this project because we really wanted to go for a very cinematic style of lighting, and so having a lot of experience with background painting and noticing how light affects things and temperature relationships played a huge part in setting up the show, and definitely, I mean, that's almost all of what post is other than animation retake. So yeah, I think you can't go wrong with doing some plein air painting every
Yeah.
weekend. That's going to take you far.
BG paint, environmental design, like set design, like the shoebox, like view of things, like knowing how it can be used for staging, all that stuff. And also obviously like thinking about story, always thinking about story, always thinking about character. You know what I mean? Like with every Scanlan prop or related thing, we try to get his sideburns in it, right? And so that's a kind of a funny example, but that's throughout the show and anything you're going to work on. I think those are the core things. You really do want to get that like environmental design under your belt.
Yeah, there are little things like in every environment where, like the rooftops on the houses in Whitestone are supposed to be sloped in a certain way that matches the fact that, hundreds of years ago they all immigrated here on boats that hypothetically they would have built themselves. So like, what happened to that kind of craftsmanship when they decided to settle down in this place and mine stones and just agriculture? So yeah, I think really digging in deep and thinking about story, that'll never steer you wrong either.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Hi.
Hi.
I had a similar question to the question regarding like drawing reference from fan art more in regards to character design. So when I was looking at the passes, the first passes versus the final passes, and seeing how some of the like smaller details of the designs are taken out, how do you pick and choose what to like abstract and be more economical about when slowly going through the process of designing a character for animation?
I think you look at stuff, yeah, like from a practical standpoint, like how well does it read in terms of a big picture read, and then how annoying is it to draw over and over? You know what I mean? Like some of the things that we took out were like Vex's belt buckles used to have like the rectangle within the rectangle, and it's like, how much is that accomplishing, and how annoying is that for an animator?
Yeah.
There's certain things that are hard to draw a lot that you just feel that you just have to have. You know what I mean? And that's so you're already spending part of your budget on that, and you have to think of it as like you don't want to go over a certain like line mileage budget, and finding ways to simplify things for the biggest graphical read that will read at a distance and that's not too fussy,
Yeah, there's almost nothing more important than silhouette.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about designing for animation. You try the economy, it's the art of economy, and that forces you to streamline things to have the greatest impact from every line you put down. That's a lifelong pursuit of trying to master that, like I've had phases. It sometimes depends on who you're working with. I don't want to blame my collaborators, but like I look back at certain things I've done, I'm like, oh my God, like the line mileage on this is insane, and it's I feel bad about it because I know somewhere I killed an animator. You know what I mean? To send flowers to the family. So I think these main models are 3 years old now, and I'm still pretty happy with them. I don't think there's some things about each model that are like, okay, probably could have done that simpler. I'm not going to say what, but like, yeah, but I think they still hold up. The animators that we worked with were vocal about what they didn't like, and so which is great because they're really talented. Not every studio will do that, and not every production on our side invites that. So
Right.
we were lucky, and we had a dialogue with them. So
Yeah, we wanted to have a strong relationship with that studio.
Yeah, we wanted the best out of them. So if there's something they don't want to draw, told them to point it out, and they did.
Mhm.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a junior in college right now, and I'm majoring in concept design. And recently, I've decided I don't really want to do like film concept design. I really wish to work on stories like Legend of Vox Machina. So I was wondering, like, what kind of portfolio tips do you have, and how should I like network to get into the industry?
I think you're in the right place. LightBox is filled with talented people who work in animation or are trying to break into it. Don't discount the importance of making those relationships with other people trying to get into.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, for years, my friends and I just kept each other fed. When one of us got laid off, the other one would say, oh, maybe you could jump over to my place, or just know of another job going on. So build your network, not just the people who you think are going to get you a job, but the people who are also looking.
Yeah, definitely, because it's always good to be discerning with relationships, but like, you know, yeah, support each other. You know, it's a tough business. It's super competitive. There's a lot of work to be done, so I don't think anyone should be like pessimistic about your chances. I think like you just have to be persistent. I think, yeah, the networking angle is important. A good social media presence is cool. You know, like when I was breaking in, there wasn't really any social media stuff to speak of. Like you know, this is back when you had to like wait in portfolio lines. You know, you couldn't just reach out and hit somebody on Instagram or Twitter. You know, some people are so good that your work is going to stand out online, and you know you'll be courting. You know, studios will be courting you. If that's not the case, that don't be too, you know, don't feel too bad about that. That's, you know, you just have to build your portfolio, build your skills, and I definitely think that like having an online presence can help because, you know, people can see your work and they can see your development, and yeah, definitely. You know, just good advice for everybody is to not be an asshole online. Like, there's a lot of really talented artists that are really kind of jerky online, and it's like, wow, like I don't, you know.
Yeah, everyone's looking.
Not that you guys are like that.
Yeah, no one in this room. But yeah.
Yeah, but especially if you are trying to break in, like your social media should be more about that, I think, or have a private one for just your friends and family if you want to pop off and stuff. It's
That's
totally
good
fine.
advice, yeah.
But yeah, keep it.
It's
know.
your business card. so
Exactly.
treat it that
Like
way.
yeah, and it's just good rules for life. Be nice.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. Is it okay if after the panel I show you some of my stuff, or are you busy?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we could take a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so the more and more time I spend at Lightbox, the more I learn that with any animated project, there's so much research involved. But with Critical Role, there's already such deep lore that like goes all the way to like the roofing tiles. So my question really is how much outside research you had to do, so like for like the sun tree and like the castles, and how much of that is information you drew from the lore of Critical Role?
Ooh, that's a great question. I will say, like, when there's something I don't immediately remember from watching on stream, the Critical Role wiki is actually amazing. And apparently, even Matt reads that thing. So
Yeah. That's true.
So yeah, we're lucky to be in such a richly explored kind of universe that already has all this back information lore, with a massive fan base that goes online and takes tabs on every single dice they roll throughout the session. Yeah, it's crazy. That's a huge boon to the show. I mean, yeah, we did a ton of reading as we were putting it together. I had the campaign guide next to me the whole time, and obviously having access to Sam, Matt, Travis.
Yeah.
They're like walking encyclopedias.
They know their world inside and out. Having them there is awesome. It is funny though. Arthur pointed out that like sometimes even Matt gets it wrong. It's happened a couple times. He's like, oh yeah, that guy's hair is not red. It's black or whatever.
Right.
You know, and that's cool because the wiki is a great source. But yeah, I think what's wonderful about it is that there's so much lore, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with like having something to build on is a whole lot of fun. Creating something original is fantastic. There's nothing like that either, but I really, really love building on something that other people have laid groundwork for. And being able to add like a brick to the wall is a lot of fun. you know?
Yeah, there's nothing better than having passionate collaborators who are just excited to talk about that stuff. with each other.
Exactly. And there's nobody more passionate than these creators. That was also part of what was infectious about the atmosphere from day one working on the show is you're working with the people that created it. Whereas again, working on older IP where the creators are maybe long past, it's a different thing when it's just completely corporate owned versus like I'm working with the people that invented this stuff and there's no one who loves it and knows it more, is more passionate about it. So that kind of had a ripple effect out to the whole team. And
Absolutely.
I think we all felt that way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. I wanted to ask, when you're composing a scene, like narratively and visually, how did you translate Matt's narrative, from the tabletop and the narrative of the players into the scene, the drawing from the emotions and kind of thinking about it visually? Like, how did you go about that process?
Well, I mean, luckily Travis and Sam are executives on the show, so they have a huge hand in writing the scripts. So they really are, with Brandon, keeping track of every little thing, and they literally had a whiteboard starting off of like, here's all the beats that we want to have, and then I think going through you realize 22 minutes is not a lot of time compared to the 3-hour games or however long they tend to go to sometimes. So it was more about seeing how many of the important things they could string together to create a narrative that's actually going to make sense, because you're just not going to hit it all.
It is streamlining, and we pack a lot into the show. So it's like there's a lot of stuff that just can't make it, but it's still so dense and heavy. I mean, you're not lacking for content, but it's a process, and they've been fairly accommodating when it comes to like having to like kind of sacrifice some stuff too.
Yeah.
You can't have every single thing from the streaming show in the animated show. So we consciously at every level, and I think our supervising director Sungjin was really involved in like how do we take the core elements that are super important and turn this like live radio or podcast play essentially and turn it into 24 minutes of animation. So
At the end of the day, not every person in the audience knows all that story.
Right.
So
You have to realize that we're trying to we all had to realize and think about we're trying to get a larger audience, a broader audience that hasn't ever heard of the actual streaming source material. So all those things have to be considered.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi.
So you talked a lot about how it was really helpful having things like the wiki or just like having the actual team behind the original show for the design aspects, but you also brought up stuff like that, the sort of symbiote Orthax design. Are there any of those like just your designs that kind of came through that were a little like off the beaten path of what was already there with Critical Role? Like any specifics from the show?
Did we do anything that was like weird and not really like?
So Vax's Simon Snake belt has an eye patch.
Yeah, we gave.
Yeah.
And it was like Sungjin like insisted.
Sungjin was just like, we should give him an eye patch.
Yeah. I think like we're making a Metal Gear reference. I love Metal Gear, but it's just like, why here? Why now? I guess he is a stealth character.
Yeah.
Snake.
Yeah, that's just the first one that springs to mind, but I'm sure there's a couple.
Yeah, there's probably a lot that we can't remember now, especially season 1 because it's been a while. But like, well, it works on so many levels.
Yeah, every joke is so layered.
Galaxy brain. Yeah, so there's definitely stuff, but we really tried to be faithful to the what was in the original campaign.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
that's the most important thing, to keep it faithful.
Yeah. I think we can take one more
Yeah,
question.
let's do one more. Make it good.
Okay, I don't know, but
I'm gonna give up my spot.
hi.
Hi.
So you had to be like pretty strict to what the cast wanted the main characters to look like and keep the designs like faithful. But for certain like NPC like background characters, like I just noticed with Keeper Yenin, like Archibald and like Stonefell, they're totally different from how they are supposed to look in the show. So I'm wondering like, talking with the cast and figuring out how you wanted to, I'm not sure if it's a question for you guys, but figuring out like with their design and look and like changing that from how it was in the podcast.
Totally, yeah. I think a lot of that came in really early at like the script stage. They knew that they wanted to be able to, a lot of things that Matt made up, I think, were just off the cuff. And so it's like...
They had more time to think about it by the time we're doing the animated series, and then they already have actors in mind.
Yeah.
So I don't remember at this point what reference I used for Yenin or Archie or any of those other characters, but
they did like specifically right, like Archie's gonna be kind of like this childhood friend dwarf guy now. I think originally he was older, so stuff like that where it streamlines a lot of the storytelling because we know what's going to happen to Archie and why that needs to be important to Percy. So we'll make them more like childhood friends instead of just this old guy in town.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, because some of the characters were different in the campaign. For sure.
And I think certainly like casting like a broader variety of people to play these parts instead of
like a more diverse cast and also who is going to play the character, and that really affects the design. I think Keeper Yenin, I don't think I did any alternate versions. I think they liked the first version. There were maybe some different versions of the robe.
Yeah, I know with Uriel, we weren't sure who was going to play
Uriel, we did multiple versions because the casting wasn't figured out.
Yeah.
So we have, more of a Middle Eastern looking Uriel and one that looks more East Asian. And then when we figured out that it was going to be Kari Payton, who I've worked with a lot, who I adore, who's fantastic. Then we knew, okay, he's black, so that casting can have a big, impact on character design.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes you know exactly what it is, and then you find the actor. Sometimes you reverse engineer it.
Yeah, luckily they had full control, so they did the right thing whenever they could.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.
What? Oh. I did some background retakes on the Sentry roots exploding light into vampire face. And all
Rebels.
The rebels.
The rebels.
They're badasses.
Yeah.
Bad guys.
Bad guys. Villains.
Yes. And the color script from the main title. So I don't think I've shown that anywhere, but that's what it looks like.
Yeah, so this is color script stuff, like just painting the storyboard to get the mood, show the creators what the mood is going to feel like.
Yeah, kind of a slow build, start off cool and kind of idyllic lighting, and then move into the crazy stuff later, everyone's dead parents. That's it.
There you go. Thanks, everyone. One more thing. We did like a longer version of this for the Nomon presentation.
Yeah, that's
so there's
amazing.
like more of this, us talking about this exact thing. If you go to YouTube, Nomon's YouTube page, and just look up like our names and I think Vox Machina.
Yeah.
You should find that link.
It's the one that's 3 hours.
It's 3 hours and some change. So we covered almost all of the same things, but in a longer format.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right on.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.